Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So today we are working on the Aristo again, and the last time that you guys saw this car, I went ahead and installed the new set of BC Racing coilovers. So it was a pretty easy install, not anything too crazy or too outlandish to get them in. All that I needed to do was disconnect the upper ball joint, swing the knuckle and everything out, and I was able to do the swap in the front, and the rear was even easier. So today, we're finally going to knock out the brakes on this car. So this has been a bit of a series of trials and tribulations to get to this point where I'm actually ready to do the brake job. So initially, I ordered all of these components over here. So these are just basic Lexus GS300, JZ S147 GS300 brake rotors and brake pads. And I figured that the brakes would be the last thing that Toyota would change between the Aristo and the Lexus GS, and I was wrong. When I pulled the fronts apart, I laid one of the rotors down side by side with one of the new rotors, and quickly figured out that there is a diameter difference, and therefore there is a caliper difference. And long story short, just these components over here were not going to be the solution for the brake job, or they weren't going to be the answer for that. So I went ahead and I ordered some Lexus GS300 calipers. Those are right here. So we have the two fronts, one rear right now, the other rear will be in later today. And I was happy to find out that just swapping out the calipers, and this is after doing some research to figure out there was a difference in part numbers between the actual mounting brackets on the calipers between the GS and the Aristo. You can see very quickly this ended up going down the rabbit hole, but I figured out that they use different calipers. So got the GS calipers, figured out that they were going to fit, and now I'm just waiting on the outstanding rear caliper to come in. But for right now, we can still make some progress, and one of the things that I really want to do is to paint these calipers. Now they look all right as is right now, but we can see that there's a color difference between the two fronts, and these will end up rusting and looking nasty over time, which I don't want. So right here is the solution to that. Some duplicolor caliper paint, and I'll disassemble these, kind of mask off the areas that I don't want to get paint into, which would namely be the actual hydraulic connection right here and the bleeder. I'll pull those out, and we'll be good to go to spray some paint down after I disassemble these, so the actual caliper body and the bracket are separate. I think that will be a little bit more effective way to do it. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, get some paint on these calipers, and get them ready to go on the car. Well, with all of the Aristo's new calipers painted, it's now time to do the actual brake job. So here's how everything came out. Not perfect. You can see in some areas, like right here, I obviously didn't do a good enough job cleaning these before I sprayed paint down, but I'm not going to go through and redo them at this point in time. We'll throw them on the car, see how they look there, and I can do some little touch-ups and things like that when they're actually on the car. So now I need to go ahead and reassemble all of these, and I've kept them in an orientation such that I know which caliper goes to which bracket, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead, get them reassembled, and then we can start doing the actual swap on the car. So the first thing that we need to do with this Aristo brake job is to disassemble everything. So we need to get the old calipers out of the way, the old rotors out of the way, and make room for the new stuff. One item that I want to make a note of right now are these rubber soft lines. So the purpose of these lines being here as there's obviously a brake line running down to where it transitions to the soft line. Well, the soft line is there for the steering throw as well as the suspension travel. This is a flexible section as opposed to a hard line that actually allows that movement to happen without putting a bunch of stress on a hard line and potentially rupturing one of the brake lines. Now, I'm going to keep these OE ones on the car for right now, but I do have an aftermarket, it's a Project Mu set of replacement stainless braided hard line, or soft lines rather, that will go on this car. They just aren't here right now. So we'll make do with the OE ones for the time being. And then when the Project Mu ones come in, then we can get those swapped out at a later date. So this is fairly straightforward, and I've already had everything loosened before, so it will make it that much easier. But it's two 17 millimeters to loosen the caliper off, plus a 14 millimeter for the actual banjo bolt here. The caliper, or the rotor slides right off, and then we can put the new parts on from there. Well, the front brakes on the Aristo are now all installed, and everything went together very nicely. So a couple of, or I guess one big note, when you are replacing calipers, you always want the bleeder to be on the top side. If you place it on the bottom side, then you will have an absolute nightmare trying to bleed the hydraulic system, and you actually won't be able to do it. Air likes to rise in liquid, so the bleeder needs to be on the top side for the air to actually be able to make its way out of the system. Otherwise, you'll just be capturing bubbles in the upper part of the caliper, and you will be beating your head against the wall. But that being said, the front brakes are on, and I did have to modify these backing plates a little bit just to get everything to clear. But that was a simple matter of just putting a screwdriver in and tweaking those plates out of the way. And this side over here, you can see that it's done. And everything's good to go. So that little bit of a drag will hopefully go away once there's fluid in here that actually will cause the pistons in the caliper to extend and retract. But for now, let's go ahead and knock the rear brakes out, which these will just be a repeat of the front side. And then we can focus efforts on actually bleeding these new calipers. Well, the Aristo's brakes are now all installed, and I actually came in this morning and did a little bit of tailor fitting in the form of playing around with the edges of the pads. Now, it may be difficult to see since everything is black here, but I shaved the powder coat off of the edges of these tabs that the pads actually sit into the mounting brackets with, and I greased everything, and now the pad spreader springs on the inside here, those are the little springs that you guys, if you've ever done brakes before, they connect the two pads, and the purpose of them is to spread the pads out when you're not braking, so that way the pads aren't sitting and riding on the rotor. So if I push the rotor up to the edge, you can hear that sounds much better than what it did yesterday. So at this point in time, you can see I have the ladder out, I have my jug of brake fluid here, and right there is my one-man pneumatic brake bleeder. So at this point in time, I can now go ahead and bleed the brakes. Since I had the system open, replacing the calipers, absolutely need to bleed the brakes. And that will ensure that there is fluid up to the calipers, so there's no dead space, or I'm not compressing something that actually is compressible, meaning a gas as opposed to a fluid, or a liquid rather. But I can go ahead and get these bled, and then at that point in time, we'll be ready to take this thing out and do the actual brake bedding sequence, which will make sure that the pads are mated up to the rotor perfectly fine and perfectly acceptably. But with all that being said, let's go ahead, bleed the brakes, and then we can take this thing out and see if all of this ended up solving the vibration that the car had. Well, with the new brakes on the Aristo, made a massive difference. So before, when you would be slowing down, coming up to a stop sign, something along those lines, the car would have a horrendous vibration as you were essentially coming up to a stop. So I figured that was due to warped rotors. Who knows the last time this car had a brake job done, and I'm happy to report that that was the culprit, and that issue is taken care of at this point in time. So I'm actually headed to drop the Aristo off right now, as the next project that will be featured on the channel just dropped off this morning, and I needed the extra space. So the Aristo will be living at my house for a little while, and that'll be pretty cool, again, to make it home and see this thing sitting in the garage, or have the opportunity to daily drive it for a little while. But the brakes, I guess we'll see here in a few moments when I make it to a stop sign. They feel fantastic. The car stops great. And once I had all of the correct parts and correct components for this, the brake conversion went together very easily and very well. So, again, with the coilovers and the brakes and new tires and everything, this car is an absolute joy to drive. It is one of the nicest driving 90s cars that I've ever had the opportunity to pilot. And this purchase just keeps getting better and better as time goes on. I think the next order of business for this car will be getting the gauge cluster squared away. The new speed sensor that I put into this thing, it seemed to help the intermittent speedometer signal a little bit, but when I had the car out the other day, both the tach and the speedometer stopped working for a period of time. So I'm thinking that that issue is probably more centralized around the cluster itself than it is sensors. So I can probably kill two birds with one stone, pull the cluster out, have it gone through and the lighting fixed. I can get the flickering speedometer needle taken care of, and take a look at the contacts and everything else at that point in time as well, and see if I see any abnormalities, or if the company that will refinish the cluster finds anything crazy or outlandish or anything like that as they're doing their thing. So we still have some autumn colors around here. You guys may be able to see some of the trees up on the hills and everything there. But for the most part, most of the leaves have fallen at this point in time, and before long it'll be winter and build season, which we have some pretty interesting projects to knock out this winter, and we have a Mark IV to get ready for racing. I went to a track rental with my buddies and their pretty cool Fox body the other week, and between that and watching all of the World Cup coverage, I think at this point in time the fire has been reignited inside of me to go and make hits in my Mark IV and to go racing in general. So kind of it's an unfortunate time for that, since we're coming up on winter at this point in time, but that gives me all winter to get the few projects that I would like to get accomplished on that car knocked out, and we'll be ready to make some hits when spring comes around and nice weather and good track conditions are available. We are coming up to a stop sign here in just a moment, and you guys would have been able to hear the horrendous brake vibration before, so I'll shut my mouth for a second as we come up to the stop sign. You guys can hear it's super smooth, super nice. So prior to doing this brake job, I would have gotten an unwanted back massage during a braking situation like that. But as you guys heard, it is super smooth, no drama, no anything like that. And now we're just cruising down the road in this lovely, lovely car. So let me avoid a piece of farm equipment. If you guys can see that behind me, that was a big one. But this thing is great, and it's taking every ounce of my being not to dive into this car, but I have a plan and an order of operations in mind of how I want to knock out this project to avoid having it be a paperweight for an extended period of time, and we'll get to that as winter comes around. A few weeks ago, I went to a track rental that my buddies Bob and Sean with their really cool Coyote-powered Fox body were at, as well as Jared with the blue SRT4, if you guys remember that build series. So this was just a rental. Bob and Sean were attempting to go sixes with the Fox body, and Jared was doing some dialing in with the SRT. So, like I said, I went out there to watch and support them, and I filmed a little bit while I was there, not really with the intent of having it be part of a video, but more so to show suspension data and things like that for them. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and watch that footage now, as there isn't really another good place to put it in a video. And with the little outing to the track rental, that will be about the end of this episode. So, big things accomplished on the Aristo in this episode. Although I didn't do an incredible job filming it, the brakes were a rousing success, and although the audio quality was not great in the in-car footage, which please forgive me for that, I have to figure out a better solution for in-car filming moving forward. But that being said, the Aristo is finally something that I actually really want to drive around now that all the little gremlins are pretty much solved at this point in time. But with that being said, that'll be about the end of this episode, and behind you guys right now, I'm looking at the subject of our next little video series. So we'll get into that in next week's episode. This one's pretty cool. It's a familiar face around here, although you guys have not seen this car just yet. But we have a pretty cool project coming up with that. A lot of history with this car and a lot of good memories, and I can't wait to get started on it. But that'll be then. This is now. So let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys as always for coming along on all of these different journeys and adventures with me. Whether we're working on Toyotas or anything else that has happened here in the time that I've been filming these videos, I'm having a blast doing all of it. I hope that you guys are enjoying your time here as well, and I look forward to doing it for as long as I can into the future. But with all of that being said, that will be the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way, including my 15th anniversary t-shirts and hoodies. Those are available through the end of 2024, so if you'd like a piece of BPA history for your collection, that is an excellent way to get a piece of it. If not, well, then hopefully there's something in the future that does speak to you and that you would like to add to your collection. But with all of that being said, that will be the end of this episode, and I will see you guys in the next one.